Have you ever heard about a war where birds were the enemies? Yes, you heard that right. Birds. Not just any birds, but emus. This unusual conflict, known as the Great Emu War, unfolded in the wide expanses of Australia back in 1932. Now, when we think of war, we picture grand battles, powerful armies, and sophisticated weapons. But this war was a departure from the norm, a unique confrontation between man and bird. So what sparked this extraordinary conflict? The stage was set in the vast wheat fields of Western Australia. The early 30s were a challenging time for Australia, grappling with the harsh realities of the Great Depression. The government encouraged veterans from the Great War to take up farming in these regions, promising bountiful harvests. However, nature had other plans. Enter the emus. These large, flightless birds native to Australia were in the middle of their breeding season. And what better place to find food for their young than the lush wheat fields? Thousands of emus began to descend upon the farmlands, causing significant damage to the crops. The farmers were at their wits' end, their livelihoods under threat by these feathered invaders. Unable to fend off the emus, the farmers turned to the government for help. And thus, the Australian army was called into action against an enemy unlike any they had faced before. You might be thinking, how hard could it be to fight off a bunch of birds, right? Well, you'd be surprised. So, with the stage set, the players in position, and the stakes higher than ever, the Great Emu War was about to commence. It was a conflict that would go down in history, not for its grandeur or its glory, but for its sheer absurdity. So how did this strange war commence? Let's dive into the chronology. The year was 1932, a year of desperation for Australian farmers. The world was still reeling from the impact of the Great Depression, and Australia was no exception. The once flourishing farmlands now bore the brunt of economic hardship. In the vast expanses of Western Australia, farmers had staked their hopes and dreams on the wheat crops. This golden grain was not just a source of income, it was their lifeline, their means to survival. But as fate would have it, the harsh weather conditions of the year had already made the situation challenging. Little did they know that an even bigger problem was looming on the horizon. In search of food and water, a wave of about 20,000 emus migrated from the inland regions towards the cultivated lands. These large, flightless birds native to Australia were typically peaceful creatures. However, driven by hunger and thirst, they descended upon the wheat fields like an avian horde, devouring everything in their path. The farmers could only watch in despair as their hard work was reduced to nothing more than a feast for these feathered invaders. The emus, with their powerful legs and sharp beaks, proved to be formidable opponents. They had the ability to consume large amounts of food and could travel great distances without water. Their robust bodies could withstand the harsh Australian climate, making them a force to be reckoned with. Moreover, they were fast and agile, capable of reaching speeds up to 30 miles per hour. This was not a nuisance, this was an onslaught. The damage was catastrophic. The emus left behind a trail of destruction, their relentless foraging leading to significant crop losses. This was a blow the farmers could ill afford. Their dreams of a bountiful harvest were shattered, their hopes of economic recovery crushed. With their livelihoods at stake, the desperate farmers turned to the military for help. It was clear that they were not dealing with an ordinary enemy. This was a battle for survival, a battle against nature itself. The Great Emu War had begun. In a twist of events, the Australian military agreed to intervene. Yes, you heard that right. This was not a conventional enemy, but an invasion of emus, a flightless bird native to Australia. The military was enlisted to combat this unusual adversary that had been wreaking havoc on the Western Australian farming communities. The Australian Minister of Defence, Sir George Pearce, gave the orders. Soldiers armed with Lewis guns, a type of light machine gun, were dispatched to the front lines of this peculiar conflict. Their mission was simple, or so it seemed: reduce the emu population and protect the livelihoods of the farming communities. The initial operation commenced in November 1932. Major G.P.W. Meredith of the 7th Heavy Battery of the Royal Australian Artillery was in command. His forces were small, comprising only 2 soldiers, armed with the aforementioned Lewis guns and 10,000 rounds of ammunition. Yet, the emus proved to be a surprisingly formidable enemy. Despite their size and awkward appearance, emus are remarkably agile and fast. They can reach speeds of up to 30 miles per hour, and their spread-out distribution made them a difficult target. The soldiers soon found out that corralling and targeting these birds was no easy task. Moreover, the emus seemed to have an uncanny knack for survival. Reports from the time suggest that multiple direct hits were often required to take down a single bird. The emus' resilience and speed, coupled with the vast, flat landscapes of Western Australia, made it incredibly difficult for the military to make any significant dent in the emu population. The military operation was, in essence, a failure. The soldiers returned, having expended a large amount of ammunition with little effect. The emus, on the other hand, seemed to be unfazed, continuing their march across the farmlands. The emus proved to be formidable adversaries, leading to an unprecedented tactical withdrawal. This unusual conflict was far from over, but the initial round certainly went to the emus. The story of the Great Emu War was just beginning. Undeterred, the military planned a second operation. The objective was clear: eliminate the emu menace. This time, they came prepared. With more resources and a renewed strategy, the military launched what could best be described as a tactical offensive against the emus. Although they did manage to take down a significant number, the emu problem, much like the resilient birds themselves, refused to go away entirely. Meanwhile, the Great Emu War was not just a local affair. Word had spread, and the international reaction was a mix of bemusement and disbelief. A war against birds. It seemed too far-fetched, too bizarre, but it was happening. The world watched as Australia battled its feathered foes. Back home, the public sentiment was divided. Some saw the military intervention as a necessary measure to protect the agricultural interests of the country. Others viewed it as a mere farce, an overreaction to a problem that should have been solved through more peaceful means. And then there were those who saw the emus not as enemies, but as fellow inhabitants of the land, deserving of respect and coexistence. The war, if one could call it that, was not without its share of ridicule and criticism. Cartoonists had a field day, depicting soldiers with guns chasing after birds. The media, both national and international, questioned the logic and the cost of the operation, and yet the emus continued to wreak havoc on the farmlands. Faced with continued emu aggression and increasing public scrutiny, the government made a decision. The military was recalled, and a new strategy was employed: a bounty system. Bounty hunters were called upon to solve the emu problem, and solve it they did. With a more targeted approach and the motivation of a reward, the bounty hunters proved to be quite effective in controlling the emu population. Despite the military's best efforts, it was the humble bounty hunter who eventually brought the emu situation under control. Thus ended one of the most unusual chapters in Australian history. But the legacy of the Great Emu War lived on, a testament to the resilience of nature and the folly of underestimating it. The Emu War, though often seen as a humorous footnote in history, had lasting implications that reach far beyond the Australian outback. It's a tale that, through the lens of time, has taken on a life of its own, influencing not only Australian policy, but also the cultural consciousness of a nation. In the aftermath of the war, Australia began to re-evaluate its approach to wildlife management. The nation found itself grappling with the question of how to balance the needs of farmers with those of the emus. This led to the development of more systematic and controlled measures, such as fencing and bounty programs, that aimed to keep the emus away from farmland while minimizing harm to the birds. The Emu War also sparked a debate about the role of the military in civilian matters. The use of machine guns to control emus was widely criticized, leading to greater caution in future about deploying military forces for civilian issues. It served as a stark reminder of the potential for overreach and the importance of finding non-military solutions to civilian problems. But perhaps the most enduring legacy of the Emu War is its place in popular culture. Today, the war is remembered with a sense of bemusement and national pride. It has been the subject of numerous books, documentaries, and even video games. The image of the Australian soldier locked in battle with an emu has become an iconic symbol of the country's unique history. It's a story that captures the Australian spirit, a blend of resilience, humour, and a healthy respect for the power of nature. And so, the tale of the Emu War serves as a reminder of the unexpected challenges that can arise when humans and wildlife collide. It's a story of conflict and coexistence, a testament to the complex relationship between humans and the natural world, and a quirky chapter in the annals of history that continues to fascinate and entertain us to this day.